Hello and welcome to Deep Learning Leaders. My name is Eric Landau and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Encord, the data development platform for AI teams. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Peter Gostev, the head of AI at Moonpig, everyone's favorite card sending service. Thank you for joining me today, Peter.
Brilliant. Hi, Eric. Thanks for inviting me.
So I want to get to your work at Moonpig, but before we do, I'm quite curious because you were at NatWest for some time. You're doing AI strategy there. So one, I'm curious how you got into AI in the first place, and then I would love to know what you did at NatWest because it was 2018, and I'm sure the AI landscape looked quite different at that time. But first, like, how did you get into AI in your journey?
Yeah, it's one of those things that originally when I started in consulting and before NatWest, it was kind of a lot of big data kind of language going around, and essentially analytics, people trying to bring data together. So there's not much AI during that time, and progressively more and more people starting to do more interesting analytics type of projects. And at NatWest, that was probably at least the only one I know where a big UK bank was taking it seriously in terms of introducing machine learning into their organization. So the team started as maybe about 5-10 people when I joined, where it was data scientists, data engineers, which actually sounds like a lot for if you're talking about a startup. 10 people in data science, that's quite a lot. For a bank, that was really nothing. The organizations, the whole, like, I think our risk department was like, I don't know, 3,000 people, 5,000 people. So 10 is you're barely anything. And by the time I left, we had about 100. And the team was focused on basically looking to see where we can identify opportunities for machine learning and introduce it. And I remember at the beginning we couldn't even run Python when I joined. It was that kind of bad and rudimentary. So it took a long time. Apart from just doing machine learning projects, actually just building up the infrastructure, that was a big part of it as well.
How did the infrastructure evolve while you were there? Because I imagine if you're starting with a lot of analytics, is looking at a lot of machine learning projects that take structured data sets and do kind of normal time series analysis, things that banks care about, and are less geared towards big unstructured data sets that are more important for generative AI. So did you see that kind of evolution while you were there, or was it really setting up the kind of fundamentals for just getting data at all ready for any kind of machine learning or data science?
Yeah, it was kind of everything, I would say. Yeah, the fundamentals for sure. So just getting data moved to the cloud, getting workloads moved to the cloud. And even for a number of years, we still had hybrid. Even as I was leaving, pretty sure we still had some workloads, machine learning models running on-prem. And that wasn't for any good reason. It was just the fact that the team who the project was with happened to have some on-prem workloads, and they just kind of stuck in there and so on. It was just taking a long time to move on to the cloud. And once in the cloud, it was better, but still, it's not the same as, I don't know, just hitting, I don't know, open an endpoint and off you go. So it's still, every single thing was taking a little while. So that's the complexity, and that's why also each project was taking a long time, so that's why having 100 people in this department wasn't even that much. We could probably do, I don't know, 5-6 projects at a time or something like that.
Did did they react quickly to the generative AI wave, to ChatGPT coming out, or was it still kind of fighting the last battle in the previous war?
Yeah, so I would say they did react quickly. So as quick as I guess as you could expect. So there was definitely a lot of momentum, a lot of interest at the time to go towards generative AI. And I would say it was a lot of it was driven by leadership, or rather, I would say interest was driven by everyone. And I remember my calendar was just bursting. I would sometimes be presenting like 4 times a day on different like generative AI topics to all kinds of people, from finance teams to, I don't know, customer service teams to, I don't know, retail strategy teams, something like that. So But the actual work of, for example, getting access to large language models or getting our infrastructure set up in other ways, mobilizing the teams, that was actually really driven by a few people in a kind of analytics vertical. And I've seen in other organizations, more kind of informally, I've seen that maybe that hasn't happened. And then they're still kind of floundering around with trying to get access to models and so on. And I think that was one good thing that NatWest did, is actually just really focus and try and get just access to the models, for example. So we were getting access to OpenAI via Azure, and took us probably about 6 months to do that. And it was still in Azure, for example. I think to this day, you don't get access to all models. You only get access to some models in some regions. So you're either kind of trying to guess where they're going to put in the latest models and trying to like sit in the right region, which is also not easy to do. So yeah, there are a lot of complexities like that.
Where do you think generative AI is the most useful for enterprises in the state that it's in now? Like, where can it be deployed? What are enterprises comfortable using it for? Obviously, it's a very general technology, and it can be purposed for many different types of cognitive work. But like, what is the first step for enterprises to start using Gen AI?
I would say anywhere where they can find some unstructured data, that's probably the easiest one. And I would say probably everyone has something. So any customer conversations, customer interactions, and just putting that through LLMs and extracting information out of it. And the way we can apply it, the first idea is just to get better MI, just classification of the conversations and then correlating it to, I don't know, sales or complaints or something like that. That's probably the first easiest steps to take. Then we could, for example, identify maybe like bug alerting or something like that, or some specific issues that a team somewhere could deal with. That's not like customer service team funneling that, picking any issues up like that and funneling that directly. I think that could be interesting as well. One application I quite like is estimating net promoter score for every single conversation. So right now you can get maybe 1% of your customers responding, if that. But actually, if you can estimate, it's obviously an estimate, not the same as the real thing, but still, if you get 100% coverage, then you can see, okay, what was our coverage yesterday? Were there any drivers? And then you can also improve things that way. And then I think there are probably just the way you can also maybe link it to some specific workflows, maybe like triggering raising of complaints. That's like a big thing. Or there are probably some workflows just depending on the organization that you can also trigger. But that's probably the easiest one, because you must be storing this data somewhere, and if you can actually get it connected to LLMs, that's probably just a no-brainer use case.
So operationalizing existing unstructured data that enterprises are sitting on already, and then using it for internal analytics and other potential internal workflows. Where do you see the first kind of external application that enterprises will expose Gen AI to, like integrating into products or coming up with new products? Do you see any use cases which are interesting from the enterprise side, or is that just too far away and it's too risky for those types of companies?
Yeah, I think I would say it's not necessarily too far away, but it probably takes quite a bit of work, and it just requires a lot more consideration. So I know customer service is a very popular one, but it's really, really tricky to just automate it properly. Just one simple point, which I think gets missed, is that when customer service agents doing their job, they can always go speak to their manager and, I don't know, read up on something quickly and work out how to do this process. But LLMs can't do that. I guess they could hand over to an agent, but then it kind of gets clunky as well. So the threshold for automation is really, really high. So one approach we took is actually at Moonpig already, is looking at more some specific processes that kind of underpin for example, customer service. And then we could just assist agents with doing that. So one specific example is that our customer service agents have a process that if a customer drops off, they had a long chat conversation, customer drops off, and then they need to send them an email summarizing the conversation with all everything they talked about. So now we've got a little app that just kind of does that for them. They could click a button, summarization gets generated. So, and the application does a few more things, kind of fill in the blanks and so on. So these are the kinds of things that, well, it's not like completely customer facing. Obviously, you still have agent in the loop there, but that's an example where it's such a simple thing for LLM. Like you can do it really well for almost no money. So you just need to kind of integrate it and it will work. But it's still simple enough, and you don't really need to maintain the knowledge base. You don't need to have like a lot of effort to actually get it to work. So these are kinds of easy use cases we can get going with and just start getting value out of it.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought up Moonpig because I wanted to ask like how you transitioned into being a head of AI at Moonpig and what brought you there.
Yeah, so in my last year or so at NatWest, my life basically became generative AI. So everything was about generative AI. And yeah, as I mentioned, a lot of internal presentations, occasional external presentation. And what I was kind of seeing is that, well, you can definitely have a lot of impact in a large organization. Once you deliver a project, you can impact a lot of people, customers, internal colleagues, and so on. But because things are moving so fast, you kind of want to be able to experiment with new models very quickly. You want to be able to build quick prototypes very quickly. So that was the reason for moving to Moonpig essentially. And then at Moonpig, we are about 600-person business, and we're also not deeply regulated like financial services, so we can experiment a lot more. So that was a nice transition into that direction. And also what really helped me personally was the fact that I'm spending all of my time in it, like outside of work as well. So my real influence and any value that I had really comes from just knowing what's going on. What can you use this for? What are the models that are useful? How do I approach this problem? What is even a good problem? And I would say that's where even Moonpig is, maybe people don't realize, is really actually a very techy company. We've got about half of our headcount is tech and product. And even in a company like ours, still there is gap between knowing what the models can do and actually connecting that to the real business operation. So I'm keep learning about what Moonpig does and what the problems are, and then I have enough intuition to say, okay, actually that's the kind of thing that we can actually do. And I would say this is probably, if I was to point to one gap, just generally in our many companies, that's probably it, where people just have no idea what models can do reliably. And quite often they either have very low expectations, they just think they can't do anything because, they tried GPT 3.5 2 years ago, or they kind of think that it's magic and they can do everything. So it's quite often those two kind of extremes.
So you mentioned that AI is not just your work, but it's also what you're interested in. It seems like it's your hobby, and you've picked up quite a following on LinkedIn. And I follow a lot of your posts, and I really enjoy them. Where are you getting your information? Like, how are you keeping up to date on the latest in the AI world, latest models, latest techniques? Is there a particular set of sources that you look at reliably, or are you just kind of hunting more ad hoc?
Yeah, I'd say it is fairly ad hoc. So just read Twitter, read some newsletters, just try and keep up to date. And then there's a lot of filtering that's going on. So try to just probably the biggest task is just to dismiss, to pick what to not to pay attention to. So that's probably 99%. Beyond that, I would say the trick for that in my mind is just trying to have a model of the world in my head in terms of how the industry works, what's important, such as, for example, prices going down, new models getting better, and I don't know, we get new features for developers, and kind of how that's shaping up, and then to see if any news kind of break that model or not, model of the world doesn't,
Mm.
and then and then if I see a news story that I don't know there's a new open source model that's 30B and that performs well, that doesn't really change anything. So that's a kind of okay news story, and some things just kind of irrelevant, so just move past them. But beyond that, just try and read Twitter, listen to podcasts, things like that. Yeah, and personally, I like listening, so that's how I get my information, and especially any kind of deeper topics, I'd like someone to tell
Mm.
me, and then I understand it better.
So you're looking for surprisal with respect to your existing mental model about AI. What is your existing mental model now? Like, what do you think is the status quo trend that you, or set of trends maybe that you're seeing?
Yeah, I haven't formulated it properly in my head, so I might not be able to describe it properly. But I think there's a kind of fuzzy version in my mind where probably the most important thing that the models um, are getting better as we scale, and what's important to differentiate in my mind is that not every model is a scaled up version of the previous model. So even like when OpenAI release a new model, quite often, at least all of the models that we had, pretty much, maybe except the O1 ones are a bit different, but all of the ones we had since GPT-4 came out, they're all optimizations of the GPT-4 model. So
Hmm.
to kind of say that I know GPT-4o is not as great, or some people say it's worse, some people it's maybe like a little bit better. I think it's better, but still, it it doesn't support or just refute the point about scaling. So we need to wait for the bigger GPT-5 level model and see what
Hmm.
that gives us. So I think that's a kind of one line. Maybe connected to this in terms of optimization, that models are getting cheaper all the time, and there are a few parameters there in terms of like cheaper, quicker, longer context, these sorts of parameters that should all get better. Plus, maybe not scaling kind of point exactly, but in terms of I don't know function calling, structured outputs, these are kinds of things also getting built up. So, and the reason why it's useful is whenever I think about use cases, it's just worth taking this into account. And whenever you look at use case and think, oh, that's a little bit too expensive, it actually doesn't really matter. Like you can probably build it. By the time you deploy it, you probably can move on to another model anyway.
Hmm.
So yeah, these are probably like a few points, but there are some things that slightly broke my model of understanding. I think first when very long context window came out, like 1 million tokens, that was quite surprising. I didn't really expect
Mm.
that. Then with video models, that was quite surprising. Also, how quickly, how good these models got. Because a year ago, they were pretty much all were pretty trashy, and now there are quite a few good ones. Um, yeah, then I think O1 models, I think, are maybe kind of another strand into the mental model in terms of what can you do with more inference compute, and
Hmm.
that is I think really interesting to see how that develops. But yeah, it's a kind of a fuzzy model of the world, I guess, and I think it's the most important part is like to build up the intuition, and you also just get that as you come across new use cases or people I know share some ideas. There's a lot of kind of peer learning as well, that's going on.
Yeah, so breakthroughs are happening on multiple fronts at once, including just the pure scaling and compute that you can put into the models. How far do you think the pure compute scaling can go? Not so much in terms of where it can go in terms of functionality, but economically. One of the things I like
Mm.
about your posts is that you also talk about not just the research, but the business models behind it and what's actually realistic to work in a real business. So, do you think it makes sense to throw $1 billion at a GPT-5 or $5 billion at a GPT-6, or is the camel's back going to break at some point?
Yeah, I think it is useful to differentiate between the different players that this question could apply to. So, for example, if you're an investor, then maybe it is questionable. Like, I'm not totally sure there's going to be a return for building especially a kind of second tier $1 billion model. I think that is probably not the best use of money, and we know. I did one chart where it counted the number of days that models were on the top of the LMC arena. I can't remember the stats now, but it's not good. It's like outside of OpenAI, it was something like a week. And for OpenAI, maybe it was like 3 weeks or something like that. So the return on investment is bad, but if I'm a user, I honestly don't care. Like, by all means, spend the money, train the models. So, from that perspective, I don't think we should be overly worried for companies like Microsoft and Google throwing tens of billions away. It's fine; they can afford it. We shouldn't be worried, also because they genuinely do have the money. So, I don't think anyone's really overextended themselves. And then from like AI Labs perspective, I don't see that there's like, why wouldn't they spend the money? If they're given the money, they want to train the bigger models, well, why not? I think they should. So I think if the essence of this question, they're kind of trying to take everyone's perspective, is this like a good thing to do as a society? I don't know. But if we narrow it down, am I worried that Microsoft is going to burn too much money? Like, honestly, I don't care. Do it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's definitely good for the consumer and anyone that's consuming any of these models. It's great to have the compute and intelligence be subsidized by the big hyperscalers or big VC dollars. I guess the question is if the train can continue going or eventually gets derailed because the fundamental economics aren't there to support ever increasing orders of magnitude investment into these models, or if the stakes are so large that it is rational to continue throwing money at it, with the kind of size of the economic opportunity that's on the other side of that. So I guess the question is if it's sustainable or not in your view, not necessarily whether it's good or not.
Yeah. So I think it is sustainable for at least the next cycle. And the reason is that just in terms of the GPU investments, they've kind of already been committed. And as long as I think the big test would be how good GPT-5 is. And if GPT-5 is a dud and not that impressive, I think that will be a massive shock to the market because everyone had assumed that it would be so much better. But if GPT-5 is good, then we can finance. So that will kind of secure the next tranche of compute. Let's say GPT-4 is built on, I think, some like 20,000 A100s. Maybe this will be on like, I don't know, 80,000 of H100s. So I think we'll get the next tranche of, I don't know, whatever will be 200,000 H100s or whatever the numbers are. I think it will be kind of sustainable in these numbers. But beyond that, we are starting to get to numbers which are actually high for the largest tech companies. And I would say right now we're just not in that category. Like 10 billion for a Microsoft, like it doesn't really make any difference at all. They're for a 3 trillion company. If it's like 100 billion, 200 billion, I think we're starting to get into territory where it's a bit less sustainable. So I would say we're definitely good for the next kind of cycle of by cycle I mean building out the next bigger GPU clusters, so which takes about a couple of years. And then if GPT-5 is good, maybe we're good for one more. Beyond that, who knows? Like I kind of suspect not, but I think it's not a bad thing that we invest in expensive infrastructure, and it's not it's not just kind of fake stuff. We'll actually have some infrastructure that will run, and then if models are a lot cheaper to run because the price has gone down and so on, then that's a good thing as well.
Yeah, so all eyes on GPT-5. So if you see
Mm.
GPT-5 completely crush all the benchmarks, then you should buy more NVIDIA stock. I think that's the trade here. That might be interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you have any sense? I don't know if you have any idea of like when GPT-5 could come out. Any guesses on that?
Yeah, so I think over the next kind of 6 months or so, I think we should expect quite a few of GPT-5 class models come out, or at least the next attempt to reach that level. So GPT-5 surely should be kind of maybe early next year. Feels like maybe let's say I don't know February or something like that. Then the Claude. Well, we're waiting for Claude Opus 3.5, so that should be like any week now, I guess. But the more interesting one would be the Opus or the next set of models from Anthropic, and I have no idea how quickly they're going to release them, but I think they had pretty good cadence of releasing models. So if their GPU clusters are ready enough, then maybe kind of I don't know April May maybe we should expect Claude 4. Then I think the biggest and certain one, which I think would be the most interesting one to see, is the Google set of models. The
Hmm.
I guess two, so Gemini 2. And I think that would be really interesting to see because they've clearly not scaled to their full capacity. And there was some stats from Epoch AI about how much compute Google has, and they're kind of I think 2 or 3 times more than the next one, which is OpenAI together with Microsoft. So yeah, clearly not all of that is available for Gemini models, but still, like they should be able to do much more impressive models. So I think that's interesting. Yeah, and clearly Meta is the other one who I don't know when they kind of said that they're starting to train. So I don't know again maybe kind of May June ish. That's the kind of rough time scale I expect, but it's hard to know for sure because there's probably I want the bigger it gets, there are probably more other other like red teaming and stuff they probably want to do
Hmm.
for longer, so that might delay things as well.
Do you have any speculation on who's going to win these foundation model wars, or if there can even be a winner? So you would expect that Google would do quite well because they have the compute, they have the data, they have the distribution, and yet they've been behind the others. And OpenAI is still kind of in the lead now. Anthropic is up there with them. Do you expect that to stay this consistent over time, or do you have any intuition on what other dynamics will be at play?
Yeah, it's really a difficult exercise to predict anything for sure. I think, I mean, with the caveats that who knows how well GPT-5 would be and so on. I think OpenAI has still the lead in the next round. Beyond that, it's really uncertain how things will go because I think it depends a lot on how quickly compute will be built out. Like for example, the Grok models, they seem to be getting quite a lot of compute quickly. So I think right now they're not particularly relevant, but who knows? Maybe in the next generation there might be. So yeah, I think my sense is that OpenAI will probably still have an edge in the next iteration. I think Google surely must be able to exceed OpenAI at some point. Like that feels like
Mm.
if they don't, then that will probably be something that they've done wrong. But I think the tough thing for Anthropic and also for maybe Meta, I don't know, but that OpenAI has such a large developer share and also just the consumer share,
Mm.
which I guess Meta can really win on the consumer side because they've got distribution, but I think OpenAI still has clearly big advantages from that side.
Right.
But yeah, but I think after a couple of years, after everyone has chance to catch up to OpenAI, then I think it's all bets are off. I think 2 more years, and after that, who knows?
Right. So the battle can be fought both on the research and resources side, but also on the business model and distribution side. And right now, OpenAI is kind of the leader in both, but Google should have some structural advantage, at least on the research side. But on the business model side, it'll be anyone's game in the next few years. Is that a fair kind of retelling of that?
Yeah, I think the only thing is I'm still kind of thinking about the consumer side, and the the feeling that I get is that it's not really a meaningful category, not in a size perspective, but I don't think it's a kind of coherent category. So, for
Mm.
example, like search or like LLM based search or whatever it looks like, that could be one thing by itself. That I don't know, perplexity is, I guess maybe people in the tech like it, but no one else has heard of it. Then it's like whatever Meta is doing, is that a meaningful category that is like competing with ChatGPT? I don't really think so, because okay, like you can, I know Meta has got some really cool tools about editing images. For example, you can upload a picture and just edit it with the prompt, which is amazing, far better than what OpenAI can do. But is that a competitive element, or is this just a
Right.
thing that now you can do in WhatsApp? So it's kind of not very clear that these are even like same kind of categories.
Yeah.
And I can totally see how people can use Meta stuff when they're in WhatsApp, when they're trying to do work, they use ChatGPT, and I don't know, when they're just browsing whatever, they might use Google stuff. I don't really feel like they're complete substitutes, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's so early in this field that everything feels very close together, but it's because the boundaries and the categories haven't really been defined yet. As it expands, that's where the delineations will be clearer for everyone, including the companies that are building these models and products. Um, so I would love to go through a few rapid fire questions, if that's okay. And I've really enjoyed this discussion. It's super fascinating. But I wanted to go through a few things just to wrap up. So one, what advancements in AI are you the most excited about?
Well, I guess we touched on it already. I think just by far the biggest question is how good will GPT-5 be? And this would be the first time when we have the real scaling kind of proven out. So not the kind of optimization cycles that we had before, but what really happens when we go from 20,000 GPUs to 80,000 GPUs and
Mm.
training for longer and so on. So I think that is just by far the biggest question, and I hope it's good, because I that will mean a good direction for the industry, and if it's not, then it's a bad direction for the industry.
All right, everything's riding on GPT-5. If you could debunk one myth about AI, what would it be?
So I don't know if it's a myth exactly, but just one thing that I guess maybe O1 models that have triggered as well, but it just keeps reappearing, is this conversation about reasoning. And I think there are a lot of people who say that AIs don't reason and LLMs don't reason and they don't think and they're not creative. And I don't
Hmm.
necessarily disagree, but I just find that it's such an unproductive line of conversation that it's not it's not meaningful, I think, at all to talk about this, because by extension, if people say LLMs don't reason, then they imply that humans reason, but then they imply that humans reason in a kind of pure sense. I know I don't reason in a pure sense, that I kind of can problem solve a lot better in the situations that I can kind of recognize before. And one very simple example, like in my mind, if I'm in I don't know, if I'm traveling, I'm in a hotel room in a different country, and I'm trying to, I don't know, open a window that I've never seen before, like start a shower, something like that. Like, I will be there for 10 minutes if I haven't seen that before. If I kind of can pick up, I've seen something along those lines, then I can do it. But the idea that humans somehow have this unique way to
Mm.
do everything forever is, I think, it's not debunking a myth as such, but it's one of those things that I feel like we should just drop and we should just focus on like slightly more meaningful terms, such as, for example, we might say LLMs are bad at reasoning, or they're bad at novel situations that
Hmm.
or of that type. I think that's
Right.
far more productive way of kind of exploring this set of problems.
And that's a great segue to my final question, which is adding one more, maybe productive, maybe unproductive term to it. What does AGI mean for you?
Yeah, it's I definitely do struggle with when people talk about this. I think in my mind it is there are a few elements, and one key one is to be autonomous in some way. So for example, right now all of the LLMs that we've got is something where I, as a user, have to like give a task. I have to define what it's supposed to do. I have to give it context. I have to do the integration. And I would say, and I don't know if it'll be completely AGI. You can probably create a kind of a fake version of this now. But I think it's just a necessary thing that I think I don't hear people talk about is that it's a thing that has to just exist by itself and show initiative and ask me questions and go explore, go try and solve problem by itself. So it's maybe like a little bit as a manager, if you have to do everything yourself, then you feel
Mm,
like you're just babysitting interns. But actually, if you've got a more mature team that goes off does things, then that's a kind of more in a kind of AGI category. So I
mm.
wouldn't say that's a kind of a a fully descriptive version of AGI, but I think that's probably like a key ingredient that I just don't hear a lot of people mention.
And so, do you think this new agentic wave will be one of the doors to open up at least this definition of AGI?
I think the problem is that you can kind of fake it and put it together because, yeah, if it's an agent that if you still have to, for example, if it's like planning a holiday, I have to sit down and tell it, like, these are all of my parameters, I'm doing it in this way, that's what I want. And even though it does more, it still feels like I'm micromanaging what
Hmm.
it does. So I would say it kind of is insufficient, but if it could be a very advanced agent where I maybe would come and say, you know what, I've looked at your calendar and you don't have any holidays planned for the next 6 months. I know you like this, so I prepared those few things. Like, what do you think about that? Maybe I can give a bit of feedback and I can go off and do something else. That feels a lot more like it's a more kind of proactive assistant. So yeah, maybe a very advanced version of it, maybe. But I
Hmm.
think what I've seen kind of the conversation so far, I think is just maybe a bit less micromanaging, but still micromanaging.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Peter, for sharing your insights. I found it like really, really fascinating, and appreciate all the posts that you're making as well. I'm following you aptly, and let's see what happens with GPT-5. So thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. This was fun.
Have a good one.